We're coming up on our second full Saturday at college football bowl games. Jake, we already talked about our favorite plays for this week and across Christmas. Now we're going to talk about our underdog plays.
There's just something special about betting on an underdog in bowl season because some of these games really feel like any team can get the job done. So it's always nice to be on the side of the dog.
Last night we were on USF +3 and they held Syracuse to 0. So that's a great example. Right now we've got Air Force at +1.5 against James Madison.
This line opened at 2.5 and has moved to 1.5. So you would expect that means most people are on Air Force, right? Wrong. 92% of the bets are on James Madison, and yet the line has moved towards Air Force. That's a factor called reverse line movement, which is a great indicator to look out for. But that's not the only reason why I'm on Air Force. James Madison had the #1 rush defense in the country this season, and Air Force runs a triple option scheme. So you'd think that would lead towards James Madison. But James Madison is going through a lot of upheaval in the last couple of weeks. They've lost their head coach, Kurt Cignetti. He's gone to a much superior academic and athletic institution in the Indiana Hoosiers. And a ton of players on their team have entered the transfer portal. Now, JMU is a rare case where most of these transfer portal players will, in fact, be playing in this bowl game. But you can't tell me that they're going to be playing at 100%, going all out to fight for James Madison, when they all know they're going to be at different universities within a week or so. James Madison had the benefit of playing in a really weak conference, which I think bolstered that rush defense ranked. They're not going to be nearly as good as against Air Force, who was at one point the #1 rush offense in the entire country. You got to keep in mind, Air Force is a military academy, and they've lost 4 consecutive games. I don't know about you, but I think military officials don't like losing, and they don't like losing 4 in a row. So during this 3-4 week break, I imagine they'll be practicing super hard, super intensely, and they're going to have a great game plan ready to go. I'm riding Air Force.
I saw Air Force lost their #3 running back and their #1 tight end, but it looks like their defense is still intact, and that's a top 6 defense in the entire country, which means something when you're playing against James Madison, who has a pretty solid offense, and obviously their quarterback's going to play in this one. I saw that they don't have 2 starters who are going to sit out, and obviously their coach won't be there, but I still think James Madison's pretty motivated, knowing that they weren't going to go to a bowl game, and then last minute they were able to make one because of the stipulation that not enough 5 or not enough 6-win teams were able to get in. I think the emotions are going to run high, and I think because they're going to run so high, Air Force is going to be able to come in, play disciplined, sound football, and finally break this losing streak they've been on. So I'm going to ride Air Force with you. Next up, we got Oklahoma State +2, and this one's interesting. A&M lost their coaches. They lost a couple key guys on offense and half their defense, but they're still the favorite, even with so much going on inside their program, which was a little confusing to me because Oklahoma State finished with a couple dramatic wins against BYU and Houston before they got beaten down by Texas. But this team has shown a lot of heart this year. Started off with back-to-back losses against South Alabama and Iowa State right before they went on a 5-game win streak that was capped off with a big Bedlam victory over OU. And then after that, they had a couple, moments of despair, and that's when the Texas game really got to them. They showed they responded well to adversity enough this season, though, to give me confidence to take them here. So I'm going to take the 2 points. I'm going to expect them to win, and I just don't think A&M is as locked in as OSU is going to be.
Yeah, A&M has played relatively well since firing Jimbo, but when you have an interim going into the bowl season versus a guy like Mike Gundy, who's been there for 20 years at this point, it's just such a massive coaching advantage. It's tough for me to not be on Oklahoma State in that spot.
Another game that'll be tough for me not to pick one side is Northwestern and Utah.
Yeah, this is a fun game. It should be a defensive struggle. Both these teams have really, really good defenses. Northwestern is by far the shock of the year in college football. We were both expecting them to be like a 1 or 0 win team. Yes, 0 is a realistic possibility, we thought. Turns out they had 8 wins, and they went 8-4 against the spread. They had the Big Ten Coach of the Year in Braun, and he did a phenomenal job in getting this team ready. I was incredibly impressed, and I think he's going to do a really good job getting them prepared for this bowl game. Utah, they're going to keep their quarterback, Bryson Barnes. He's transferring, but he's playing in this game. But I don't necessarily think that that's that big of a story because Northwestern had a really solid defense. Barnes is a game manager. He had 12 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions. So he's not anything too special. He'll do just enough to keep Utah out of trouble and not turn it over. Utah ended the season really cold. They lost 3 of their last 5, and that includes a win over Colorado by only 6 points, where they only scored 23 points on Colorado's horrific defense. Northwestern's got a much better defense. The over-under in this game is only 41.5, and you're giving me 6.5 points. I'm going to ride Northwestern here.
If you told me there were 0 opt-outs and this was a regular season game, I would still be on Northwestern. But now add this in. Northwestern's got 4 opt-outs. Only one of those guys was a rotator. Utah's missing their backup QB and 3 starters who are going to the draft. I think that the wrong team's favored. I think Northwestern's used to playing against really strong defenses since they're in the Big Ten West. Utah has a really strong D, but this is nothing new. Braun's going to know how to handle it. I think Northwestern's going to keep this within 3 or win it outright. I'm on the money line again, just like I was the last few weeks with Northwestern, because they've been hot. They're on a 6-0 run against the spread, and they're 4-2 on the money line since mid-October. This line doesn't make sense to me, so yep, Northwestern money line. Next up is Kansas State, NC State. Kansas State's been one of the biggest surprises of the offseason because they've got so many starters who opted to leave, but the future on their offense is getting the start at QB, and that's why I think they get the edge in this one. Avery Johnson's only thrown 35 passes, but he's ran for 6 touchdowns, and he did enough to show the staff that they needed to get rid of Will Howard and send his ass to USC. Now, here's the thing. It's fun to see a new QB get broken in, but NC State's played good QBs before. They've played dual threat guys before, and their defense that ranks in the top 25 every season isn't going to have an issue holding Avery Johnson out of the end zone. I think this total's kind of low, and it only expects K-State to score 24 points. So the real question is, can NC State match that or score more? And I looked at their last 5 games, 24 on Clemson, 20 on Miami, 26 on Wake Forest, 35 on Virginia Tech, and 39 on UNC. Yes, they can score. And yeah, I think they're going to win this one outright.
NC State has been very impressive to me this season. They lost Brennan Armstrong for like half the year, and they still played pretty well. Kansas State not having Will Howard, I think, is just going to be too much for them to overcome. I'm a huge fan of Chris Kleiman, and I think that he runs a great program there. But having to go down to a backup quarterback who hasn't played against a really strong defense like NC State, with a coach like Dave Doran who's going to get his guys fired up for this game, I think NC State's the right call here.
Next is USC Louisville. USC getting 7.5 points. Who could have predicted this before the season started? A potential playoff team, Heisman quarterback coming back, and now 7.5 point dogs to Louisville, who's got a brand new coach in the Holiday Bowl.
Yeah, USC started off hot, kind of how we all expected them to look, and they fell off a cliff massively thanks to their atrocious defense. But they fired defensive coordinator Grinch, and in the last 2 weeks, their defense has looked a lot better, in my opinion. Now you got Lincoln Riley, who's one of the guru offensive coaches in this country, and you're giving him like a month to prepare for a Louisville team who, granted, they do have a good defense. I actually think Louisville is secretly a defensive team, even with Jeff Brom as coach. But Miller Moss is in for USC at quarterback. Caleb Williams is out. USC also has a lot of opt-outs at other positions. But you got to remember, USC is one of the deepest teams in the entire country. They got 4 and 5 stars ready to go, ready to step up, who have just been waiting for their opportunity to show off and ready to show out. I don't think Miller Moss is that bad that he's getting plus 7.5 points with all the talent around USC on offense. Louisville would have only covered 7.5 points 4 times this season. The last game would have been November 4th against Virginia Tech. Louisville has not scored over 38 points since September. USC has scored over 40 points 8 times this season and only under 27 2 times. Yes, their offense is going to be worse with Miller Moss and without Caleb Williams, but I don't think it's going to be like 40 to 50% worse. I expect USC to still score somewhere between 27 and 30 points, and I think it's going to be enough to cover in this game.
Yeah, I think these are 2 totally different situations. You've got year 1 for Jeff Brom, and his team's 1 win away from getting to 11. USC has at least 5 starters that won't play, and they're basically done with this year and pretty much ready to move on. I think Louisville's offense is really good against bad defenses, and their D's strong enough to hold USC's back up to, I'd say, less than 24 points. So I like Louisville to hit 35 since they're averaging 31 points a game as it is, and SC's defense is by far the worst they've played all year, unless they played Georgia Tech. I can't remember if they did, but Georgia Tech ranks in the similar range. Either way, I'm going to stay away from this one because I think Louisville has the chance to separate themselves, and I don't know, can USC score enough points with a backup quarterback who wasn't able to do enough last year in the Pac-12 championship game against Utah when USC had the lead and then gave it all back with Miller Moss once he came back in at quarterback. Last, we've got Bowling Green and Minnesota. Minnesota's a 3.5 point favorite, but a couple years ago, they were 31 point favorites and they lost this game at home. These are 2 totally different teams against the spread. Bowling Green went 8-4. Minnesota only covered 3 times. PJ Fleck's top 2 QBs hit the portal. Their backup running backs are all gone. And before any of that happened, their offense was already near the bottom of the Big Ten. And now they got to play their 3rd string QB, who I don't think's played at all this year. And he's playing against a Bowling Green D that finished with 27 turnovers on the year. They were plus 8 in turnover margin overall. I think this line's favoring the wrong team. So I'm going to take the spread and I'm going to take the money line.
Wasn't there some rumor that Minnesota offered their backup $30K to stick around for the bowl game? Just absolutely crazy in the NIL era. What's happening? I kind of agree with you. The wrong team's favored just because of how many opt-outs. It seems like this is a game that Vegas is looking at like, well, it's Bowling Green versus Minnesota. Obviously, everyone wants to bet on the Big Ten team. And a lot of times in bowl season, it goes a little bit deeper than that. I don't know if I like Bowling Green outright here because I think Minnesota probably does have too much talent on defense, but I think it could be an incredibly close game. 39.5 is the total. I'll take 3.5 points, sure.
A very low total. Well, if you want to take that total or you want to take the spread or any of the other games that we've talked about on the money line, you can sign up to play on BroThrow for free from any state in the US without paying the VIG, which means if you bet $25 on a spread or a total, you'll win $25. Even money bets. It's the best odds you're going to find anywhere online. Again, the link is in the description box below, brothrow.com/YouTube. It's where Jake and I make all of our plays. But Jake, we'll be back with another video talking about, what is it, New Year's 6 games, and then we'll have to make our playoff picks right after Christmas. So hopefully these ones go well, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. The big games are coming. I'm getting super hyped for all these bowl games. See you in the next one.